Assalamualaikum and good morning. Today we are going to have a look at one program. The name of the program is mortal.java. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate the process of constructor chaining. As we all know, when we want to create an object under the object-oriented approach, we have to call the constructor in order to initialize or first create or instantiate the object. There are two types of constructor. One is the no argument constructor, and the other one is with argument constructor, whereby the initial values of your parameter, your data fields will be given by the user. Now, there are cases, if let's say in your in your object class, you do not have a constructor, what will happen is that Java will provide a no argument constructor to you automatically, because this will follow the routine, the simple process, the normal process, whereby if we create a, a variable, for example integer age, but we never bother to initialize the value, and it will always be when the compiler first create the variable in the memory, they will initialize with some values first. Okay, so let's have a look at our program. The name of the file is mortal.java. We have one class, public class mortal, at the bottom of the page. As you can see, this is an inheritance problem as well, inheritance representation of the objects. We can see the mother of all object would be the class name object, and there is a class person that inherits from the object. There are two more classes, student and employee, that inherits from person, and finally there is one class named graduate student that inherit from student. Okay, so if we just go through, we can see the four object classes top down. The first one is graduate student, and then class student, class employee, and class person. And you notice that there are toString method in all of the object classes. However, there is no constructor, either with argument constructor or no argument constructor. And back to constructor, as I mentioned, if we do not specify a specific constructor, no argument constructor, or with argument constructor in our program, if we have nothing of it, no problem, Java will create automatically one for us. But if we already specify with argument constructor, then the no argument constructor will not be created. Okay. Now, so we assume that as we go trace this program, all this object class will have the no argument constructor provided by Java. So we are going to run through and see what is the output of the program. And before that, we have a toString method. As I mentioned, the purpose of a toString method, you can check in another video. The purpose is to return string that represent the object. It can be anything. It is fully customizable. Okay, now let's look at the class mortal. There are two methods there. The first one is the main method. Within main method, there is only one line, which is a method call or method invocation to a method name m, which comes in the following under the main method. Okay, we have public class void m, in parenthesis object x. This means this method, the name is m, it is taking an object, the name of the object is x, and the type of object is actually object. This is an example of polymorphism. We will see this in different video. Polymorphism concept is whereby the type of a superclass, because object is the superclass of all other classes, as we can see in the diagram there. Object is a superclass for person, student, employee, and graduate student. So polymorphism says the type of superclass can take the type of all subclasses. That means in method m, we can pass any object, whether a graduate student or person or employee. if you see in my handwriting the scribbles down there, later I would like you to add yourself 3 more method calls that will pass the object student, person and employee. Okay. Okay, now let's trace the program, the main program. The compiler will go to the first line in the main method. Now, in the first line, we have one invocation, one method invocation or one line for method call that will call the method M, and it will pass a new object, graduate student. There are two things that will happen here. Before the method call can be performed, we must create the object graduate student first, because there is the keyword new there, which means we are going to instantiate a new object. The name is graduate student by calling the graduate student no argument constructor. Okay. Now the compiler will go to the graduate student class. However, then when we want to, when the compiler look for no argument constructor in graduate student class, there is none there, no problem. The compiler will create one for you. But before we can create graduate student, the compiler will see, wait, graduate student extends student. Therefore, before it can create graduate student object, it must create student. Okay, so the constructor will go to the class student and try to find the no argument constructor of student. But there is no argument constructor for student, which is okay. The compiler will create one automatically. But before the compiler can create the object student, it says that student extends person. That means we must first create person. Okay, then the compiler go to the class person to look for no argument constructor in order to create person. But before he can do that, he will find out that person extends or inherits from the class object. Now, object is the mother class in Java. Basically, if you have public class model, we can say public class model extends object. Okay, that should be the default. Now, once the compiler sees that, okay, now the topmost is object. Object is already created. Now only I create person. After I create person, the compiler will go to class employee to create the object employee, and then go back to the, now I lost track. We create person, and then it will go back, it will chain back until person, and then go to student and go to graduate student. Done. So this entire process only appears in the memory. We don't see anything yet on the display on the console. It happens in the memory when we have the first line in the main method, which is new graduate student. Okay, the entire process is called constructor chaining. Now graduate student has been created. Okay, so like if you imagine you have a ball in your hand, the name is graduate student. Now you are going to pass this object, the graduate student object, to the method M. Okay, so in the first line, as I mentioned, in the first line of the main method, as I mentioned, there are two things that happens. First, we must create the object graduate student, then we pass the object to method M. Okay, now when we go to method M, the object graduate student will pass as X. Okay, and there is only one line there, system.out.println x.toString method. At this point, compiler will say, okay, now I am going to look for toString method in object X. What is object X? It is graduate student. So the compiler will go, let's go to the class graduate student, and we see there is a toString method there. And the content is to return a string graduate student. Okay, now however, the graduate student is concatenated with another call to another toString method in the super class, which is student. Okay, so before the compiler can return the content of toString method in graduate student, it has to go to the super class, to the toString method of the super class of graduate student, which is student. Okay, and the same thing happen when the compiler goes to the class student, to the toString method in class student. It turns out the content is that to return the content of toString method in the superclass of student, which is person. Okay. Now, the compiler will go to class person. There is one toString method there which will return a string named person. So person will be returned, the string person will be returned to the toString method inside class student, which later will be returned back to the toString method inside graduate student. So the graduate student class will return the entire string, which is graduate student is person. Okay, so this entire string will be passed back to the method M. And in the method M, once you have this string, graduate student is person, it will print out on your console using the method println. Okay, so try by adding three more lines and play around with it. You should be able to do this on your head, and especially useful if you can trace using hand, because similar questions will definitely come out in the exams. Okay, have fun.